It's not often that I put a video out on shop safety, because usually common sense prevails. But this week I ran into an issue which could potentially have had severe consequences, and if I'm honest, I should have known better, but it's something that I've seen happen quite a lot. I had a couple of wooden window frames to make. It's quite a time consuming job, but fairly straightforward. I needed to make the rebate for the glass and chose to use the router. It's a messy job as it creates a lot of fine wood dust, so I decided to do the work outside. The cable to power the router wasn't long enough, so I plugged it into an extension lead. I ran a few test cuts at the table, but the wood dust was causing problems, so I hooked up the vacuum as well. I managed a couple of cuts, but then I lost all the power. After a bit of fault finding, I realised that the extension lead had tripped out, so I reset the button and I carried on, only for it to trip out again. It's then when I realised what was happening. When current flows through a cable, it generates heat. Under normal load conditions, this isn't usually a problem, but when an extension cable is used and it's all coiled up, the heat has nowhere to dissipate. It's usually okay if the loading is only small, but as the loading increases, the heat generated also increases. If it gets too hot, the insulation can melt and the next thing you know, the workshop's on fire. I'll be honest, it's only after this happened that I actually looked at my extension lead and saw that there's a maximum loading for a coiled extension lead and a maximum loading for an uncoiled lead. I probably need to actually check that I've not exceeded the uncoiled maximum with the vacuum and the router switched on together. So I made this little video just to demonstrate the potential issue, and I used a laser thermometer to measure the temperatures. Before use, the temperature of the extension lead was around 20 degrees, but I left it outside in the hot sun for a few hours and it had gone up to around 28 degrees centigrade. Luckily this extension lead trips out when it gets too hot, and I wouldn't have done this test without the safety mechanism being fitted. I ran the router with the vacuum running and made a few test cuts. It wasn't long before the extension lead tripped out. Now it took me a few minutes of faffing around to get the camera to focus in on the digital display, but even after a few minutes of it cooling down, you can see that the temperature has increased to around 40 degrees centigrade, and that's the temperature of the outer layer of the cable, which is actually quite hot to touch. Off camera, I recorded a reading of just over 50 degrees centigrade. It's a lot warmer obviously on the inside of the coil than on the outside, which is to be expected. Luckily this extension lead is designed to trip when it starts to get hot. I've had extension leads in the past that didn't have this function, and I don't know how reliable this function is on every extension lead available, but it's fairly obvious that should this function have failed or have been non-existent, then I'd probably have only known that there was an issue after it was too late. So it's not a video to teach people to suck eggs, but more of a video to highlight and remind of the potential issues associated with extension leads and the safe usage. It's not something that's always obvious to see until something happens. Simply unwinding the extension lead solved my problem, and I was able to carry on routing without any tripping of the switch. I'm just grateful that I bought a decent extension lead, because if I was indoors and the lead had overheated, it doesn't bear thinking about. I know that if I'd bypassed the trip switch, it would probably have made for a more dramatic video and definitely highlighted the potential dangers of coiled up extension leads, but hopefully it's easy to see that just after a minute or so of running a couple of common workshop tools, there is the potential for a problem to occur, and it's a problem that can pretty much be eliminated simply by uncoiling the extension lead. Prior to making the videos on YouTube, I worked as a firefighter for nearly 20 years, serving my community and helping to save lives and promote the fire safety message. Unfortunately, an accumulation of many upsetting scenes became too much for my mind to cope with, and after years of failed therapy I was retired from the service on the grounds of ill health and signed off medically from any employment. To keep myself busy, both body and mind, I developed an interest in woodworking and car mechanics, and with already having a hobby in filming and music, I combined my interest and started making videos here on YouTube, filming, editing and composing my own music for my woodworking and car restoration channels Smugwood and Smugwoodmini. Unfortunately, to produce such videos comes at a price, and with minimal funds after being retired from employment, I've turned to Patreon to see if there is additional support out there which could allow me to continue making the woodworking and car restoration videos. In return for support, there are various levels which are explained in more depth at the Patreon link below, but includes the chance to win one of my YouTube projects made throughout the year, and also inclusion into random prize draws open to patrons only. In addition, I'd like to thank everybody who already subscribes to my channels, or watches, comments, likes and shares them, as it all goes to help support my channels, and for that I'm really appreciative. It's my hope that I can continue making the videos for the foreseeable future. Thanks once again for your continued support.